In this episode, we're gonna address how I'm gonna generate the 1.21 gigawatts I need to power my new studio.
1.21 gigawatts! 1.21 gigawatts!
Okay, maybe we can get away with a little less. This week we're shooting in the comfort of my temporary office here because it has become way too hot outside for me to drag a bunch of camera and lighting gear over to the house where there is no insulation and no air conditioning.
Right now in Laurel, it's 92 degrees Fahrenheit.
Nope.
With partly sunny skies.
With the walls going up quickly at the house, it's time to address the wiring that we need. Now, most normal homes would require an outlet or two and maybe a switch, but I'm not normal. While most cameras and lighting equipment can be run on battery these days, this is a studio setup, and the beauty of that is that everything can be plugged directly in and you never have to worry about juice. While plugging your gear in directly is super convenient for power purposes, it can mean long runs of cables and can be cluttered and really mess up the studio space. Wouldn't it be nice if there was an outlet close by, no matter where you were in your studio? Challenge accepted. Just like in my old studio, there's going to be an outlet located roughly every 2 feet on every wall, ensuring that I will never have to run a long mess of power cables to plug something in. But unlike my old studio, we've moved a few of the outlets up to the top of the wall near the ceiling. I've located one of these raised outlets in each of the 4 corners of the studio space, allowing for lights to be easily wall or ceiling mounted and not have to run their cables down to the floor. I made it work in my previous studio, but the cables can really make the space begin to feel cluttered. Now you may be thinking, well, why didn't you just put the outlets in the ceiling itself? And you know, I thought about that, but if, say, I'm gonna have a light that I temporarily need to go in one of those corners and then can be moved later, I figured it's a lot easier to reach an outlet that's high up on a wall than trying to plug directly into the ceiling. So I think having them up high on the wall in each of the corners is gonna give me the most versatility and flexibility if my lighting setups change down in the studio. But there will be one outlet mounted in the ceiling itself. Directly over where I plan on having my workbench for shooting these YouTube videos, I'm going to have an outlet for my overhead camera. In my previous studio, I had this rigged up with a Panasonic G7 and was able to run the power cord across the ceiling, down the wall, and plug it in. But obviously having this outlet directly in the ceiling is going to be a much tidier power solution for that overhead camera angle. Now I have 2 types of YouTube videos that I produce in my studio space. I have the recorded videos that I then edit and publish, and then we have the live streams. Recorded videos are easy because each of the cameras can record their angle internally, and I can edit that together at the end. But with live streaming, I need to have a feed coming from each of the cameras into a streaming computer, and that's where the fun begins. Previously, I would feed the outputs of all of my cameras into an HDMI switcher, and I would feed the output from that switcher into a laptop that would then stream via Wi-Fi. Now that worked fine, but can it be better? So late last year, I picked myself up a new Mac Pro 2019 computer, and she is an absolute beast. And so of course, I want her to handle all of my streaming. But it's also going to need to be located in my office 1 floor up because obviously it's a powerful editing machine as well. So how do I have all of my cameras from downstairs in the studio connect with my computer 1 floor up on the other side of the house? The answer is lots of cables. In this corner of the basement studio, we're going to install what I'm calling the master panel. This panel will have cables that run through the house to a sister panel under my desk in the office. These panels will allow direct wired connections between my Mac Pro upstairs and all of my equipment downstairs in the studio. So what connections am I gonna need? Between the master and sister panels, I want to run SDI, 2 3-pin XLR for audio, Ethernet, 2 HDMI to send video both to and from the office, and a USB connection so I can have a mouse and keyboard down in the studio that controls the Mac Pro upstairs. I'm also gonna have an HDMI input in the ceiling next to that outlet for that overhead camera angle, and that's gonna have a dedicated output over near the master panel itself. The ceiling HDMI was actually quite simple to run. Just a normal 25-foot HDMI cable allowed me to make the connections with some cable to spare. But running the 100+ foot connections from the master panel to the sister panel poses a bit of a challenge. HDMI begins to become unreliable at distances over 30 feet unless you have some sort of powered repeater or you're using an expensive HDMI cable that has a built-in chipset to boost that signal. Luckily, there's something out there called HDMI over Ethernet. A small box takes the HDMI signal and sends it over a much more affordable Cat6 cable to another box that converts it back to HDMI at the other end. This is how we're gonna run the 2 studio to office HDMI connections. So this means I can have a monitor or TV down in the studio that will be directly connected to my Mac Pro upstairs, and I'll be able to see what's on the Mac Pro. But how am I gonna control what's happening on that computer? And that's where Ethernet has another trick up its sleeve. Yeah, there's USB over Ethernet. A very similar system with adapter boxes at each end that allow USB signals to be sent over Cat5 or Cat6 Ethernet cabling. This will allow me to connect a mouse, a keyboard, and any other USB peripherals I want downstairs, and they will act as if they are directly plugged into the Mac Pro upstairs, meaning now I can control it from down in the studio. So then how are we going to handle the SDI and XLR connections? And you guessed it, Ethernet again. It turns out that both SDI and XLR can actually be wired directly into Cat5 or Cat6 Ethernet cable and transmit it over those long runs at a much more affordable price. Interestingly enough, a standard Ethernet cable can actually be wired up to carry 3 balanced XLR channels. And so, with nothing more than a long bundle of Ethernet cables, I'm going to be able to send all of the signals that I need between the studio and the Mac Pro in the office upstairs.
2 weeks later.
So it's been a few weeks since I shot the majority of this video, and the house is now finally connected back up to city power, which means we have air conditioning, which means it's kind of bearable to be in here. I'm just shooting on my phone right now real quick because it's still a little hot to be dragging a whole bunch of camera gear over here. But as you can see, a lot of work has been done, a lot of the wiring has been done, a lot of the outlets are in, all of our cabling is in the walls, and while all the breakers and power isn't on yet, it will be in probably just a couple of weeks. So if you want to see what happens when everything is all connected up and powered up, make sure that you go ahead, subscribe to this channel, and make sure that you're following this series because we still got a few more steps to go before it's time to move into the new studio.